Welcome to UBI Unplugged, breaking down the future of income. I'm really excited about today's topic. It feels incredibly timely given everything that's happening in the world. We're going to dive into universal basic income, AI regulation, and how these two massive trends might intersect, especially concerning the future of work and ethical considerations.
Timely is one word for it. I'm still wrapping my head around UBI in general, let alone throwing AI into the mix. Feels like a solution looking for a problem, or maybe I just don't understand the scope of the problem. So yeah, keen to see where this goes.
Cautiously optimistic is where I'm at. UBI in theory could be a game changer, especially with AI potentially displacing a huge chunk of the workforce. But the devil's in the details, right? Funding, implementation, unintended consequences. There's a lot to unpack.
Absolutely, and that's what we're here for, to unpack it all. I think one of the most compelling arguments for UBI right now, especially in the context of AI, is the potential for mass unemployment. We're already seeing AI automate tasks across various sectors. What happens when entire industries are rendered obsolete?
Okay, but mass unemployment? That's a bit Chicken Little, isn't it? We've had automation before. The Luddites were worried about looms, and we didn't all starve. New jobs emerge, right?
Yes, and that's a valid point. Historically, technological advancements have created new jobs. But the pace of change with AI is unprecedented, and the type of jobs being automated is different. It's not just manual labor anymore, it's cognitive tasks, creative tasks, things we thought were uniquely human.
Exactly. And the skills gap is widening. Are we realistically expecting displaced truck drivers to suddenly become AI engineers? The retraining programs are often insufficient, and the new jobs often require specialized skills that many people simply don't have or can't realistically acquire in a reasonable time frame. UBI could provide a crucial safety net, allowing people the time and resources to adapt.
But where does the money come from? That's always the sticking point. Higher taxes? Deficit spending? It feels like robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Peter ends up even more unproductive.
Yeah, the funding is a huge challenge. There are different models being proposed. Some suggest taxing AI companies directly, a sort of robot tax. Others advocate for streamlining existing welfare programs and redirecting those funds. A wealth tax, maybe? It's a complex equation.
And it's not just about the money, it's about the societal benefits. UBI could lead to increased entrepreneurship as people have a cushion to pursue new ideas. It could improve mental and physical health by reducing stress and poverty. It could even strengthen democracy as people become more engaged in their communities when they're not struggling just to survive. Think about the creative potential that is currently being squandered by people simply trying to survive. UBI unleashes that.
That sounds utopian. What about the disincentive to work? If people get free money, won't they just stop working? We'll end up with a society of couch potatoes glued to their screens.
That's the big fear, right? But studies on UBI pilot programs have shown mixed results. Some people do reduce their work hours, but many continue to work either because they enjoy it, or because the UBI isn't enough to live on comfortably, or they want more. And some actually increase their work hours, using the UBI to invest in their skills or start a business. It's not a simple equation of free money equals laziness.
And consider the alternative. If AI truly does decimate the job market, what's the plan? Let millions of people starve, rely on increasingly strained and inefficient welfare programs. UBI, while not perfect, could be a more humane and efficient solution. Plus, it provides a level of dignity and autonomy that traditional welfare often lacks.
Okay, but you're assuming AI is going to be some job-destroying monster. Maybe it'll just augment our abilities, make us more productive, like spreadsheets or the internet. Those things changed work, but they didn't eliminate it.
That's a possibility, sure. But even if AI augments our abilities, it could still lead to significant job displacement. Think about radiologists, for example. AI can now analyze medical images with increasing accuracy. Even if radiologists aren't completely replaced, their workload could be significantly reduced, leading to fewer jobs in the field. And what about legal clerks, paralegals, customer service representatives? The list goes on.
And that's where the AI regulation piece comes in. We need to be thinking about how to shape the development and deployment of AI to maximize its benefits and minimize its risks. Should we be prioritizing AI development that creates jobs rather than destroys them? Should we be taxing AI companies to fund retraining programs and UBI? These are crucial questions.
Regulation, that always sounds like a recipe for stifling innovation. You start putting all these rules in place, and you just end up hamstringing the companies that are actually creating the technology. We'll fall behind China, or whoever else isn't playing by the same rules.
That's a legitimate concern. Overregulation could definitely stifle innovation, but no regulation is equally dangerous. We've seen what happens when tech companies are allowed to operate with impunity: data breaches, privacy violations, algorithmic bias. It's a wild west out there. We need a balanced approach, one that encourages innovation while protecting people's rights and ensuring societal well-being. Think of it like aviation, highly regulated, but still allows for incredible advancements.
Exactly. And AI regulation isn't just about preventing bad things from happening, it's about actively shaping AI to serve the common good. For example, we could incentivize AI development that addresses climate change or improves healthcare or promotes education. The technology is neutral, it's how we use it that matters.
So, how do you even regulate something as complex and rapidly evolving as AI? It feels like trying to nail jelly to a wall. By the time you figure out what's going on, the technology has already moved on.
That's true, it's a constant challenge, but there are some initial steps we can take. For example, we can require AI systems to be transparent and explainable so we understand how they make decisions. We can establish independent auditing bodies to assess AI systems for bias and discrimination, and we can create liability frameworks for when AI systems cause harm. It's a process of continuous adaptation and learning.
And the ethical considerations are paramount. AI could exacerbate existing inequalities, or it could help to reduce them. It could be used to control and manipulate people, or it could be used to empower them. The choices we make now will determine which path we take. And that brings us back to UBI. A UBI-enabled world could provide a buffer against the potential harms of AI, giving people more control over their lives and more agency in shaping the future.
Okay, let's bring in some of today's news, as you mentioned at the start. There's that article about Trump potentially suspending habeas corpus. That feels like a pretty drastic step, and it raises questions about due process and civil liberties. How does that tie into this whole UBI AI conversation?
It ties in because it speaks to the potential for instability and the erosion of fundamental rights. A UBI can act as a stabilizer during times of political and economic uncertainty. If people have a basic level of economic security, they're less likely to be vulnerable to authoritarian measures. Imagine if people are already struggling to make ends meet, and then suddenly they're facing mass deportations or other forms of government overreach. A UBI could provide a safety net, allowing them to resist and organize.
Yes, and the potential for abuse of power is always a concern. The article about the arrests on Tennessee roads in support of Trump's deportation plan is also relevant. It highlights the vulnerability of immigrant communities and the potential for discriminatory enforcement practices. A UBI could help to mitigate the economic vulnerability of these communities, providing a platform for long-term economic advancement, regardless of their immigration status. Though, of course, we'd have to address the specific challenges of including undocumented immigrants in a UBI program.
That Baraka arrest. That feels like politics, right? A mayor protesting an ICE facility. It feels like everyone's grandstanding, and no one's actually solving problems. How does UBI fix political theater?
UBI doesn't directly fix political theater, but it can change the incentives. When people are struggling to survive, they're more likely to be swayed by divisive rhetoric and short-term promises. A UBI could create a more stable and informed electorate, less susceptible to manipulation, and it could free up politicians to focus on long-term.
The article also touches on the potential charging of other NJ Democrats. It raises questions about accountability and the use of law enforcement for political purposes. It highlights a potential overreach by the Trump administration and the need for checks and balances. This connects to UBI in the sense that a society with greater economic equality is likely to be more resilient to political manipulation and authoritarian tendencies.
That's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? UBI is a bulwark against political corruption. I'm not seeing the direct link.
It's not a direct link, but it's an indirect one. Economic insecurity can breed desperation and resentment, which can be exploited by unscrupulous politicians. A UBI can reduce that insecurity, creating a more stable and engaged citizenry. And think about it, if people aren't so worried about where their next meal is coming from, they might have more time and energy to pay attention to what their elected officials are doing.
And let's not forget the article about Trump thinking shaping the Middle East, while the Gulf states are actually dictating US foreign policy. It underscores the complexity of global politics and the influence of economic interests. A UBI, implemented globally, could potentially reduce the influence of these power dynamics by providing a basic level of economic security for all citizens, regardless of their nationality or geopolitical circumstances. Though, again, the logistical and political challenges of implementing a global UBI are immense.
A global UBI? Now you're just dreaming. That's never going to happen. It's pie in the sky thinking.
Maybe, but we need to be thinking big, especially when it comes to addressing global challenges like climate change and economic inequality. And the point is that economic security, whether provided by a national or international system, can shift power dynamics and create a more level playing field.
The focus on economic anxiety surrounding Trump's tariffs is also relevant. It highlights the potential for economic volatility and the need for safety nets. A UBI program could be structured to act as a buffer during times of economic instability, allowing societies to adapt to shocks without disproportionately harming vulnerable populations. It's like an automatic stabilizer, kicking in when needed.
But what if the UBI itself contributes to the economic volatility? If you're just printing money, you're going to fuel inflation, and then the UBI becomes worthless.
That's a valid concern. Inflation is a real risk. That's why the funding mechanism for UBI is so crucial. It needs to be carefully designed to avoid inflationary pressures. That could involve taxing unproductive assets, or implementing a carbon tax, or streamlining existing government programs. The key is to find a funding source that doesn't simply increase the money supply without creating corresponding value.
And that's where empirical studies and pilot programs come in. We need to rigorously test different UBI models to assess their impact on inflation, employment, and other key economic indicators. We can't just implement UBI blindly. We need to learn from the data and adapt our approach accordingly.
Speaking of data, what about the data that AI collects? That's a huge privacy concern, especially in a UBI-enabled world. If the government is providing you with a basic income, are they going to start tracking your every move, using AI to monitor your spending habits and behavior? It feels like a dystopian nightmare.
That's a very important point. The potential for surveillance and control is a real concern. That's why strong data privacy regulations are essential in a UBI-enabled world. People should have the right to control their own data and to opt out of data collection. And there should be strict limits on how the government can use data collected in connection with UBI.
Yes, data privacy is crucial. And we need to be thinking about the potential for algorithmic bias in UBI distribution. If AI is used to determine who receives UBI or how much they receive, there's a risk that it could perpetuate existing inequalities. We need to ensure that these systems are fair, transparent, and accountable.
So basically, you're saying that UBI and AI regulation are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other?
Not necessarily, but I think they're strongly interconnected. AI has the potential to exacerbate economic inequality and social instability. UBI could provide a buffer against these harms, but UBI also creates new challenges, such as data privacy and algorithmic bias. AI regulation is needed to address these challenges. It's a complex interplay of forces, and we need to be thinking about it holistically.
I agree. UBI and AI regulation are not silver bullets. They're just tools. And like any tool, they can be used for good or for ill. It's up to us to ensure that they're used in a way that promotes human flourishing and societal well-being. And that requires careful planning, thoughtful policy, and ongoing vigilance.
Vigilance, that's the key word. Because all this sounds great in theory, but I'm still skeptical. I think we need to be very careful about implementing UBI and regulating AI, because the unintended consequences could be disastrous.
Of course, but inaction is also a choice, and it carries its own risks. We can't afford to bury our heads in the sand and ignore the potential challenges and opportunities presented by AI and UBI. We need to be having these conversations, exploring these ideas, and experimenting with different approaches. The future of work and the future of society depends on it.
Agreed. It's a complex landscape, and there are no easy answers. But by engaging in open and honest dialogue, and by embracing a spirit of experimentation and learning, we can navigate this transition successfully. We just need to keep a critical eye on the data and a compassionate heart for the people who are most affected.
Well, I'm still not completely convinced, but you've given me a lot to think about. Maybe UBI isn't just a crazy idea after all. Maybe it's a necessary evil in a world increasingly shaped by AI. Or maybe it's just a pipe dream. I guess we'll see.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on UBI Unplugged. We hope this conversation has sparked some new ideas and perspectives. Keep the conversation going and let us know what you think.
And remember to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay critical. The future is unwritten, and it's up to all of us to shape it.